For nearly a century, the overwhelming academic consensus has been that the biblical Exodus, the epic story of plagues, parting seas, and liberation, was just a myth. And why? Well, mostly because scholars believed there was a total lack of physical, archaeological evidence. But in this explainer today, we are diving into some absolutely shocking new research that challenges that entire assumption.
I mean, what if the historical research up to this point has literally just been looking in the wrong time frames or through the wrong lenses? Right now, we're seeing this massive new wave of multidisciplinary research. We're talking forensic archaeology, paleoclimatology, and revised historical dating, and it is completely shifting the conversation. We're going to look at some incredible new clues that researchers suggest align objectively with the ancient texts, bringing this huge biblical mystery right back into the light of actual historical investigation.
So, let's jump right in. Part 1. Witness of the Enemy, the Ipuwer Papyrus. Our very first major clue comes straight from ancient Egypt itself, a secular document known as the Ipuwer Papyrus. This ancient hieratic scroll is basically a cross-cultural witness to a period of total environmental and social collapse. The papyrus is laid out like a poetic lament by an Egyptian scribe named Ipuwer, and honestly, his words are haunting. He writes, "The river is blood. Men shrink from tasting, human beings and thirst after water. All is ruin." Researchers point out that this is not some triumphant theological text, This is a raw, eyewitness account of someone living through a society completely falling apart. When you actually compare these texts side by side, researchers note a truly eerie parallel. On one hand, you have the biblical text from Exodus describing the first plague, and on the other, it perfectly mirrors the secular Egyptian scribe Ipuwer. Both are describing this unearthly catastrophe where the Nile, which was literally the lifeblood of the Egyptian economy, just becomes completely undrinkable.
But here's the crazy part. The parallels in the papyrus don't stop at just a bloody river. Ipuwer's lament actually mirrors multiple plagues. He talks about grain perishing on every side, widespread famine, the land being left completely without light. And most chillingly, he describes groaning throughout the land and the children of princes dashed against the walls. I mean, that is a striking echo of the death of the firstborn, right? He even notes a sudden socioeconomic upheaval, where poor servants are suddenly wearing gold and lapis lazuli. That perfectly matches the biblical account of fleeing slaves plundering Egypt's wealth before taking off.
Which brings us to part 2, dismantling the false gods, the theological polemic.
Shifting gears to the theological perspective for a second, the sources argue that the plagues weren't just random natural disasters. No, they functioned as this masterfully structured spiritual warfare against the Egyptian pantheon. The research brilliantly illustrates the systematic nature of the assault, where every single plague targeted a specific Egyptian deity. Turning the Nile to blood, that desecrated Hapi, the god of the Nile inundation. The plague of frogs directly mocked Hecate, the frog-headed goddess of fertility, literally turning her sacred animal into a putrid curse. And those 3 days of thick darkness? That was a direct eclipse of Ra, the supreme sun god. According to the research, this whole sequence was designed to demonstrate the absolute impotence of these specific gods.
So the absolutely crucial point here revolves around an ancient concept called Ma'at. In Egyptian ideology, the pharaoh was seen as a living god, and his main job was to maintain Mata, the cosmic order, truth, and the balance of nature. The source material argues that the relentless sequence of the plagues was specifically engineered to completely dismantle Ma'at. It proved to the Egyptian people, without a shadow of a doubt, that their pharaoh was utterly powerless to maintain the natural order when faced with the God of the Israelites.
Part 3. The Forensic Miracle, the Ecological Cascade.
Now you might be wondering, how might this have happened physically? Well, modern paleoclimatology actually offers a really fascinating natural mechanism. It all starts with a massive event right around 1500 BC. New radiocarbon dating on artifacts from the reign of Pharaoh Ahmose I has shifted some timelines, pointing directly to the cataclysmic Thera, or Santorini, volcanic eruption happening right around the time the Israelites were in Egypt. This massive eruption serves as a potential anchor in time for all the devastation that followed.
Scientists propose that this eruption actually triggered a rapid ecological cascade. It's like a giant domino effect. First, volcanic ash and minerals trigger a massive red algae bloom, turning the Nile blood red and acidic, so the fish die off. Step 2. Without fish to eat their eggs and desperately fleeing the toxic water, massive swarms of frogs invade the land. Step 3. The frogs die and their decaying bodies become a massive breeding ground for flies and gnats. And step 4. Those insects transmit fatal diseases like anthrax to the livestock,
which then leads to boils on both humans and animals. It's a terrifying, but scientifically plausible chain reaction.
Now, look, presenting a naturalistic explanation doesn't just erase the divine aspect of the biblical account. As researchers are quick to point out, God often uses the natural world as his instrument. The profound miracle here is actually found in the extreme precision, the unprecedented severity, and the selectivity of the events. Specifically that incredible geographic anomaly where the land of Goshen, which is exactly where the Israelites lived, was completely protected from these cascading horrors.
Part 4. Unearthing the Wanderers. The physical footprints.
So, if a massive group of Israelites lived in Goshen and then vanished into the wilderness, where is the archaeological proof buried beneath the sands, right? Well, researchers point to a site called Tel El Deba, which is ancient Avaris, located right in the biblical region of Goshen. Excavations there revealed a massive Semitic immigrant population that used distinctly Canaanite four-room house architecture. They even found over a dozen signet rings bearing the name Yakub or Jacob. And honestly, even more amazing than that, they found a total lack of pig bones in their domestic waste. That indicates a proto-kosher diet. And then, the archaeological strata shows that this massive city was suddenly and mysteriously abandoned. It is a stunning correlation to the biblical Exodus narrative.
And as you'll see, the epigraphic evidence, the ancient inscriptions, tracks perfectly on a timeline once they left Egypt. Skeptics used to say Israel didn't even exist as a people group until much later. But look at this. The Berlin pedestal dating to around 1450 BC literally mentions a group called Israel in Canaan. Then by 1400 BC, the Soleb inscription mentions Yahweh. And later, the Merneptah stele around 1205 BC declares Israel is laid waste. Scholars argue this strongly indicates that both the nation of Israel and the name of their god were recognized by the Egyptians centuries earlier than modern critics previously claimed.
The source highlights the Soleb inscription as a massive challenge to the idea that the Exodus is just purely mythical. It was found on a temple column in ancient Nubia, and it explicitly refers to the land of the nomads of Yahweh. Now, Egyptians normally identified nomadic groups by their geographic location, but here, they identify this specific group of wandering nomads solely by the personal name of their god. It squarely identifies these Israelites wandering in the wilderness precisely when the texts say they were there.
So, what does this all mean? When you pull all of these threads together, a remarkably clear picture emerges from the research. By combining the haunting secular texts of the Egyptians, the theological polemics against the ancient gods, the natural science of ecological cascades, and the hard archaeological ruins of Avares, these sources argue that the evidence overwhelmingly points to a real historical core. From this perspective, the Book of Exodus isn't just a late invention. It appears to be a faithful record of a very real, world-reshaping catastrophe. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question. We spent nearly a century assuming the physical evidence simply didn't exist, only to realize we just kind of hadn't dug in the right places or tested with the right timelines yet. If the stones, the signet rings, and the ancient papyri are already speaking this clearly, what other ancient mysteries are just waiting to be unearthed beneath the sands? Thanks for joining us for this explainer. To dive deeper into these discoveries and access more multidisciplinary research, visit us at www.sermonacademy.com. You can support this mission by becoming a founding partner at www.sermonacademy.com/donate. And be sure to sign up to receive weekly Bible study resources at www.sermonacademy.com. Keep exploring.